You know, I know it's an old joke, but Warner Brothers could have really warned a brother if they were gonna drop a bomb on us today. Especially when I was at work and they come up with this news. Alright, I'm wearing a Freddy sweater. It's Christmassy, because red and green. But also, Freddy, owned by New Line, which doesn't exist anymore, so it's part of Warner Brothers, and this is a big Warner Brothers announcement today. Or I'm just wearing it because it's cold, but I'm trying to tag it in. So, Warner Brothers. Oh boy, alright, so, obviously, when theaters were first going to reopen, Warner Brothers decided to be the first studio to push out a big movie, and so they pushed out Tenet, mostly because probably Christopher Nolan insisted it be a theatrical release and everything. And then Tenet underperformed. It did not very well in the US. It did about 50 mil, a little bit higher than that. And it did another 300 or so international, so not really profitable is basically what I'm saying. So, that result scared off all of the other distributors from releasing anything big. So, what we've gotten in theaters since September has been library catalog titles, and it's also been smaller films that have come. So, stuff, you know, little dramas, some horror, some comedy, some family stuff, you know. Croods did better than any other movie post-pandemic at the theater this past weekend, but still not very good compared to pre-pandemic numbers that we would expect for the Crude sequel. But so Universal took the tactic of releasing some of their smaller stuff and doing the 17-day theatrical window. 17 days exclusive, and then it goes to PVOD. And then, subject to my last video, Warner Brothers, having seen that the Tenet strategy did not work right now for a blockbuster, their next blockbuster, Wonder Woman 1984, they decided to do King Solomon's Split the Baby in 2, or in this case 3, instead. So, and I don't think I went into all of these details because I recorded that video about the Wonder Woman announcement very quickly after that news came out. But first 31 days, it's on both HBO Max, free to their subscribers. So you pay for a subscription, but it's not an extra fee like Mulan was for Disney+. And in theaters. Both of those simultaneously. Then, 31 days, HBO Max shuts off, exclusive theatrical. Another 31 days, PVOD. So basically, the 3 ways that studios have been releasing new movies, either in the theater, PVOD, or drop it on a streaming service, they're doing all of them. Now, it remains to be seen if the theater chains are going to be cut in to any of the PVOD revenue, like Universal's doing for the chains that are willing to show their movies with the 17-day. I think that's still an open question. But otherwise, Warner Brothers seems to at least want to give movies to theaters and have that exhibition strategy. But they also sort of realize after Tenet that until things go back to whatever normal is going to be, an exclusive theatrical window isn't going to suffice to gain the numbers they need to be profitable on movies, especially their bigger blockbuster stuff. So, we sort of, after the Wonder Woman announcement, maybe we expected other studios to follow this strategy, or that Warner Brothers might follow this strategy with some other movies, but we sort of assumed they were going to wait to see how Wonder Woman performed, to see if it was a viable strategy, before they announced anything else. But then, a story came out about a week ago, that Godzilla vs. Kong, the third movie of Godzilla and the second movie of Kong Skull Island mashup, I guess it was kind of sort of being shopped around to streaming services, or maybe it wasn't being shopped around, but Netflix came in with a pretty strong, $200 million offer to buy it, and Warner said no. And the reasoning seemed to be that they were discussing perhaps putting it on HBO Max, the streaming service owned by Warner Media being the parent company of both Warner Brothers Studios and HBO Max. So we were thinking that, oh, well, if they make another announcement of this Wonder Woman type, it would probably be like Godzilla Kong. It's probably going to be that movie. And that maybe they take a one movie at a time scenario. And it makes sense for Godzilla versus Kong because the last Godzilla, King of the Monsters, it kind of underperformed a little bit. So maybe it didn't have as high of an expectation for a domestic box office. And remember, HBO Max, it's available in the United States, and but it's not available on Roku yet. I made that mistake in my last video. They added it to Amazon stuff, but it's not available for Roku. And it's also not available anywhere internationally. So, so for a movie like Godzilla Kong, which can be expected to make some bank international, but maybe be a little weaker on the domestic side, that strategy made sense. Until HBO Max can expand to other countries and other regions of the world. So what we didn't expect, or at least I didn't expect it, and I know a lot of you probably didn't expect it, Warner's announced that their entire 2021 slate of films is gonna follow the Wonder Woman strategy of HBO Max, theatrical, 31 days, shut off HBO Max, theatrical, another 31, and then PVOD. Okay, the entire 2021 schedule, which I looked it up, it seems to be about 17 movies. Most of them, I mean, pretty big movies, because, I mean, that's just what studios are in the business of these days. So, yeah, so here's part of what I don't get about this, and I'll get into the mechanics of this, but I'm not an expert on vaccines or virology or anything like that, but this has all been sort of reported in the news, and correct me if any of my facts are incorrect, but at least 3 somewhat viable vaccines have gone for approval to be able to be used in the general populace. So they're going for FDA approval. Some other countries, they're going to their similar boards. One of these vaccines just got approved by the UK, though they may have cut some corners, apparently. And then it's expected that the vaccines could start getting rolled out to certain people in December and January, mostly the people who work in the medical field, elderly people in nursing homes, caregivers, that sort of thing. And that best case scenario, the average person, you, me, someone who's, not high risk or anything like that, could get it at the earliest around April of 2021. So let's assume that it is April, and let's assume the vaccine can inoculate a large portion of the United States populace in a short time, which is a bit of a reach. We are a country of about 350 million people or more. We'll know when the census comes out, I guess. The census results, at least. So there's only so many doses that can be made and then shipped, and some of these vaccines require like a 2-dose over the course of a month type of thing, and a lot of stuff. But it is semi-feasible that if enough people are getting inoculated by April, that by the summer movie season, people might be willing to go back to the movie theaters in something approximating normal amounts. I mean, there's a lot of X factors there, government capacity restrictions, who can get inoculated versus not inoculated, whether in this economic climate that's been caused by the pandemic, people can afford to go to the movies. I mean, there's a whole bunch of X factors there, but generously, this might be the soonest that things could go back to something approximating normal would be the summer. Warner Brothers seems to be betting that that's not the case, and that 2021, the entire year of 2021, is going to be much of the same of what's happening right now, where most theaters are closed. The theaters that are open, they have capacity restrictions, and even the attendance isn't even reaching the level of capacity restrictions. I mean, Sometimes when I've talked to people that I've seen movies recently, like I just set up a review of Mank, and I had that theater to myself on Black Friday. People are like, "Oh, movies are open? What's even out?" So perhaps movie theaters haven't done the best job of communicating that they're open, and in certain locales they're not open at all, obviously. But it remains to be seen when people are going to feel comfortable going to theaters. So it seems that Warner Brothers is banking that they're not going to be comfortable for all of next year. Well, I mean, I can't blame them. It is a realistic prediction. I'm just a little surprised that they decided to sort of have off with the whole year and just say, fuck it, our entire theatrical slate is following this streaming same-day strategy. So, I guess I should get a little bit into the finances of this. So, when a movie studio pays to make a film, I have a feeling that people think that it's just that the studio has money, and then they just pay for it the way you go to a store and pay for a piece of merchandise. That they get the money from their previous profits or their shareholders or whatever, and they do it that way. And that's not really the case. They usually have outside investors, or they take out loans, because movies can be tens or if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and not a lot of corporations are that liquid, you know? So usually they'll get money from different types of investors, whether they're banks or private equity firms or investment companies or, you know, whomever. And they'll go make their movie. And then they sort of have a release date and a contract about how revenue is going to be spread after money comes in and all that stuff. But here's the thing. Anyone who's ever taken out a loan before knows that there's a thing called interest. And the longer that they have a finished product that was paid for with other people's money that isn't released, they are racking up extra expenses with that interest payment. For instance, I think I read an article about the No Time to Die, the new Bond movie, and that every month that it gets pushed back, the studio has to pay $1 million in interest. So leaving these things on the shelf indefinitely or for numerous months sometimes isn't feasible. And a movie that may have had a certain budget here with a marketing budget here, you know, maybe the level of profitability being here ends up going to like here when you add in all the interest payments. I mean, $1 million a month for a movie that costs $100 million kind of drop in the bucket for these people, but you know, not every movie is going to be like that. So you have a movie that's pretty much racking up debt, idling in a garage, almost, to use an analogy. So, here's something interesting. Even though Warner Brothers Studios and HBO Max are both owned by the same company, they have separate finances. So, Warner Brothers Studios still has to be paid by HBO Max to stream the movie. So it's kind of a robbing Peter to pay Paul situation. I forget which hand is which already, but so HBO Max will pay Warner Brothers for the movie. Warner Brothers then can pay back its investors and pay its talent and fulfill its financial contractual obligations, and the debt is then shifted to HBO Max. And then HBO Max, you know, maybe it's paid back from the revenue from theatrical or PVOD, or maybe it just takes the loss and it's a loss leader to gain more subscription base. Though, honestly, I'm not sure how they figure out if a movie was worth the investment based on subscriber revenue. I mean, if somebody subscribes and pays a month subscription fee for a movie and then cancels their subscription the next month, then you kind of know they only subscribed to watch one movie. So you kind of you can kind of figure it out that way, but if someone is subscribed and you're keeping them subscribed, you don't necessarily know if that individual movie is the reason they stayed subscribed, or the general entire platter. So it's kind of hard to reconcile how these things are monetized in the streaming world. I'm sure there's experts on like the Netflix business model and all that stuff that can probably explain that better. But basically, part of the reason I think Warner Brothers has signed off on that is because they get some upfront revenue to pay their expenses, and they get these movies out. And, you know, to Warner Brothers' credit, they do seem to be invested in keeping exhibition alive. And some of their statements have been to this effect. It's like, hey, you know, if movie theaters are staying open, they're going to need product to show. And the product that they have to show right now is, you know, stuff like Freaky, stuff like The Croods, maybe some family movies, maybe some lower budgeted dramas and horrors and stuff like that. But they don't have any big blockbusters, or at least big potential blockbusters, nothing that's really going to pull in audiences, which the theaters need if they're going to survive. I mean, there's only so many stock shares and debits or debt investments and all this. There's only so many Wall Street tricks these companies can do before it's just like, hey, you're not bringing in revenue, declare bankruptcy or do something. So at least Warner Brothers is sort of like, hey, you know, the first month, you share, sure, but we will take a smaller cut of the ticket prices than we normally would in pre-pandemic times. And then, after that first month, that second month, that's all you, fam. You get that second month. And then the third month, PVOD, and then whether they cut in the exhibitors on that, we don't know yet. I think there's still discussions on that. And sure, I mean, Regal is completely closed right now, and when Regal reopens, if they do reopen, they're going to have to make a decision about whether they're going to play these Warner Brothers movies for not following the traditional theatrical window, or if they're going to go the way AMC and Cinemark have, which is to, you know, we'll play it at a shorter window right now, as long as you cut us in a little bit on that PVOD money, even if they're just cutting, you know, they're sharing a 10% piece of the pie between all of them. So, I at least give them credit for the theatrical stuff, at least letting theatrical have a little piece of the pie, as opposed to that's, you know, Disney decided not to do that with Mulan, except for overseas. But, you know, whether this is financially viable in the long run, because even if Warner Brothers Studios is made whole, this could still end up being a big money loss on HBO, because after they reimburse Warner Brothers, I mean, it's still Warner Media. Warner Media, the parent corporation, is still the one that has to, you know, file the quarterly results and everything. And I don't know how many of these movies are going to be considered in the green or in the black versus in the red. It's to be seen. And, you know, looking at Warner Brothers' slate, and again, they had about 17 different movies. I wrote a list on my little Kindle here. Let's just go over what some of these movies are. The Suicide Squad, James Gunn's Suicide Squad sequel, that had a potential to be a big blockbuster if it was exclusively in theaters. And I know they're doing some sort of spin-off TV show for HBO Max already, so at least the synergy's there. Plus, you know, if the fucking Snyder Cut's going to come on sometime in 2021, then, you know, there's going to be a lot of DC stuff, so DC nerds are just going to be like, eh. The Matrix 4 and Dune, both of which were scheduled for late in 2021. I think The Matrix was scheduled for December of 2021. So, you know, they still had a chance to hold off and maybe get that exclusively in theaters after inoculation and mass vaccinations. But I don't know. They're no. Godzilla vs. Kong, as we mentioned. The Space Jam sequel. I didn't even know that finished filming. I thought that was a little delayed. Couple other things I haven't heard of. Little Things, Judas and the Black Messiah. I mean, the Tom and Jerry movie. I mean, sure. I mean, I guess I get that. The Mortal Kombat reboot, that was originally scheduled for January of 2021. That's supposed to be like the R-rated one that James Wan had something to do with. I don't know if he directed or just produced it, but, you know. Something called Those Who Wish Me Dead. The Conjuring third movie. Again, The Conjuring is a big... That entire franchise is a big moneymaker for Universal. I mean, no matter how fucking horrible The Nun was, and that was like the worst movie of the... That was my number one worst movie of the year that I ended up seeing it at, and I didn't go to see it by choice. aside from that, it still had 3 Annabelle films and 2 of the regular Conjuring movies. It's still a very viable, very profitable franchise. And I know there's another Conjuring movie, I think, that Patrick Wilson's directing, or is that another Annabelle? I don't know. He's directing something in the damn franchise. I'm not a fan of it. In the Heights, the Lin-Manuel Miranda musical. I mean, I guess we know from Hamilton on Disney Plus that there's an at-home streaming audience that wants to see Lin-Manuel Miranda stuff. I'm just, again, something called Reminiscence, something called Malignant. The Many Saints of Newark, which is the prequel to The Sopranos. So it's a mafia movie set in like the 1950s in New Jersey. I mean, okay, I get it. The Irishman Netflix ended up getting that because it was too expensive, and The Sopranos was an HBO television show, so people are used to seeing these characters on the small screen. It was just, the idea of seeing a Sopranos movie on the big screen made it sort of special. It'd be like if Disney dropped the Bob's Burgers movie on Disney Plus. It was like, all right, but I mean, then it's just a long episode of the TV show. Then it's not a movie if it hasn't, you don't have a chance to see this thing you used to see on a small screen on a big screen. But it's like, how disappointing would it have been 15, 20 years ago if the Simpsons movie just went directly to streaming service if they existed back then, King Richard and Cry Macho. Oddly enough, the Batman is not on there, so I think that's been pushed to 2022 at this point. I mean, it had to shut down production for COVID for a little bit too, but... So, I mean, there's some big titles in there, and I can't imagine all of these movies, which, some of these could have been, they have the potential to be, billion-dollar hits or several $100 million hits on the high end, and now, what is the barometer of success for them, and what does Warner Brothers' financials look like to make this worthwhile? I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, it could go... There is a distinct possibility that after Wonder Woman 84 comes out, that it fails. That it fails theatrically, that it fails to bring in subscribers to HBO Max right now, and that maybe it underperforms on PVOD. I mean, chances are at least one of those 3 things is going to bring in some revenue, but whether it's enough to break even or turn a profit, I don't know. And it'll be very interesting to see. And then, depending on the performance of Warner Bros. In 1984, will Warner Brothers decide against doing this for all these movies, or will they split the baby in 2 yet again? Will they decide, okay, instead of all 17 movies, maybe half of them will do this, and then the others will wait till, things go back to normal? Because... I'm not sure how much of this is written in stone, how much of this is already contractually done. I don't know if money has already changed hands between the Warner Brothers side of the house and the HBO Max side of the house. But yeah. And since HBO Max is not available outside of the United States, assuming all of these movies are still going to be released in international theaters where they're open. Now, I think... German theaters, I think, are staying closed until January. I think Hong Kong theaters might be closed right now. Because COVID is spiking again, a lot of places that had them opened are reclosing. I mean, not just states in the United States, but also some of these other nation states in Europe and Asia and elsewhere. So how many international theaters will be open to receive it? I mean, how many American theaters will be open to see it is still kind of a question mark. For instance, the old David Lynch Dune is going to play at my Alamo in 2 weeks, and I'd like to go see that on the big screen because I've never seen it on the big screen. And part of me is sort of like, are they just going to stay open, or is COVID going to spike because some fucking idiots decided to go to Thanksgiving and have 100 people there and cough, and maybe things are going to shut down again. I don't know. I don't want another Frankenhooker situation where my ticket's refunded because theaters closed down 2 days before my movie's going to come on. We're living in very interesting times. And then, when Warner Brothers announced this in their press release, and then one of the executives also did an interview with Vox or Recode, and the question came up, it's like, okay, if you get people used to this release model, and then COVID goes away, vaccinations, things go back to normal, can you put this genie back in the bottle, or does this become the new norm? And they seem to be announcing that, again, these are just because of pandemic times, which also indicates that Warner Brothers assumes that things are not going to go back to normal anytime in 2021 as far as the exhibition industry goes. Which there is a chance, crossing my fingers that it's not true, but there is a chance that is possible. You know, at that point, do the movie theater companies go like, okay, we're back to our 70 or 90-day exclusivity window, or we're not playing your movie? Or do they go, ooh, please let us play your movie, we're going to go bankrupt? Sorry about that. It depends on how much these studios need each other, or the studios need exhibition needs studios. Exhibition absolutely needs these movies. They cannot survive without this product. The studios, they don't need theaters for some of their product. If it's a lower budgeted thing, they probably don't need a theatrical release to get a successful, profitable film for all of them. But some of these movies are so damn expensive that they do. And, you know, movie fans have been a little upset that the only things that tend to go into theaters right now, and the only things that studios are willing to greenlit for theaters, are big blockbusters and very low-budget movies that will very easily turn a profit. So, you know, your Blumhouse horror movies. And that things like mid-budgeted comedies, mid-budgeted dramas, the things that would usually cost between like $30 and $50 million, all of those are relegated to streaming because there's no audience to go see those in the theater, for the most part. I mean, that a lot of movie fans have been like, oh, I wish this type of movie would go into theaters, but instead they're relegated to, you know, Netflix and Amazon Prime, and the only thing that's these studios want to release are big franchise movies or little indie things where there's a much bigger upside to their investment. And it's possible that if suddenly, that's not even suddenly, it's been a few months now, but if we end up in a world where big budgeted movies can no longer make their money back because exhibition has gone bye-bye, then it might completely change how studios greenlight their movies, where we might just be stuck again with the family films that are doing pretty well on PVOD, the little indie horror movies that, you know, low cost, high reward, and we might get back to mid-budgeted dramas and comedies, the kind of movie that, you know, it was never going to gross that much in the theater, but if you put it on PVOD at home, people are willing to, you know, pay the money to watch it at home because it's not a big visual spectacle or anything. So it's quite possible that, you know, without theatrical exhibition, the entire calculus of what studios want to greenlight might change, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, certainly, I'm very bored of movies that you're just watching CGI shit punch other CGI shit. So, you know, I would prefer more movies like Mank and The Irishman and other stuff that ends up going to Netflix instead. But I do still like a big budget spectacle, and you know, there's a lot of those movies aren't just empty filler. A lot of big budget movies can also be art or can actually be really good cinema too. So I don't want to see those go away either. But that's where we are. So it's funny that you basically have the two studios that have, in very different ways, committed to the theatrical experience in some form. Warner Brothers has decided on this sort of scattershot three-way plan of streaming service, theatrical, and PVOD. And then Universal has decided on something a little bit simpler. I mean, I think Universal owns Peacock, but still, Peacock's still very new, so they're not very much in the hardcore streaming game right now. But Universal has decided a very brief theatrical exclusivity and then PVOD, 17 days. So where do the other studios follow? Disney seems rather scattershot. As far as the theatrical experience is concerned, Disney doesn't seem to give a fuck about theaters. You know, they threw out their Fox property of X-Men, New Mutants. They gave that to the fucking wolves, where it bombed. It was also a really bad movie, so that's also why it bombed. So they threw that to the wolves. And then otherwise, the only thing they seem to be putting into movie theaters are their very popular library titles. Your Hocus Pocus and your Nightmare Before Christmas and stuff. Right now, Disney Plus just seems to be like, we want to dump everything to our streaming service. They tried the Mulan experiment, which doesn't appear to have been very successful. And then, after that wasn't successful, they're like, all right. And so, Artemis Fowl, which was probably bad. I didn't bother watching it. They dumped that to Disney Plus. They dumped Pixar's Soul to Disney Plus. And it was also reported that a couple of their other live-action remakes, including Cruella and a couple other, I forget the other ones to be quite honest, that they're thinking let's just dump them on Disney Plus too. So Disney, I think the last shoe to drop would be if they actually put one of their big MCU movies and just say, fuck it, Disney Plus. If they drop Black Widow or Eternals or Shang-Chi or any of those that are actually finished, that would be the straw that broke the camel's back. Because I don't know, maybe they would try the Mulan thing again, or maybe they would just dump it straight to Disney Plus without an extra fee like they're doing for Pixar Soul. But Disney right now, they don't seem to give a fuck about the theatrical experience, and they're not playing around with exhibitors, so, And then, Fox is just them now. Lionsgate dumped Antebellum to PVOD, so I don't know, maybe, I don't know what they'll do with, Spiral, the new Saw movie. Yeah, it remains to be seen what some of these other studios are going to do. Because, Universal, Warner Brothers, they've come up with strategies. Disney seems to have gone their streaming-only strategy. But, what about Paramount? Is Paramount just going to do... I know they sold, Lovebirds to Netflix very early on in this, and they have a streaming service. I guess they're turning CBS All Access into something. Is Paramount going to do one of these strategies, or are they going to pick a new way? What other studios are out there? Lionsgate for a mini-major... A24, well, A24 mostly does lower budgeted stuff, so, they have a bit more freedom as well. But A24, Neon, well, Neon's partially owned by Alamo Drafthouse, so they'll probably stay exhibition. But it does remain to be seen what's going to happen with these other studios. Are they going to follow the Warner Brothers model, the Universal model, the Disney model, or are they going to find something else? Or are they just going to sit on the sidelines, keep paying interest, and wait for things to go back to normal? I don't know. So at the very least, at least Warner Brothers and Universal have come up with a clear delineated strategy for what they want to do. And Universal's even put in other caveats like, hey, if it opens to 50 million, it gets a little bit longer exclusivity, that sort of thing. So they at least have a strategy to ride out COVID, and whether they try to push it beyond COVID is up in the air, I suppose. And it seems like all these other studios, they don't seem to want to develop one. So I'm waiting to see what some of these other major studios and these other mini majors decide to go with. So that was my little video about this huge HBO Max news, Warner Brothers HBO Max, and I'll make another video when the next shoe drops. Have a good one, everybody.